The Competition Tribunal has approved Takatso Aviation's proposed acquisition of a 51% stake in South African Airways. This follows a recommendation by the Competition Commission that the deal be approved with conditions, though. Newzroom Afrika's Dondani Dagalani takes a look.
Takatso Aviation has passed a major hurdle in its quest to acquire a controlling stake in cash-strapped South African Airways. This after the Competition Tribunal gave the green light for the strategic equity partnership deal with the government.
The clearance by the Competition Tribunal brings us sort of within, the trajectory, a clear trajectory towards the full implementation of the transaction as envisaged.
The approval does, however, come with conditions. The deal can only proceed if two of Takatso's minority stakeholders exit the consortium.
The Competition Tribunal has concurred with the Competition Commission on those two conditions, the one being the divestiture of Takatso minority shareholders to deal with concerns that the Commission had around the potential for competitively sensitive information being exchanged between aviation sector competitors through this particular transaction.
The other condition is a moratorium on retrenchments, which is what unions are mostly worried about.
What is important to us and what we're going to be fighting for, and that one I can give you, I can promise you, we will fight tooth and nail, is that all those people that have been promised jobs, at least whatever happens, whatever deals that they do is fine. But those people should be able to come back to work.
The Public Enterprises Department has described the approval as a step in the right direction.
The Competition Tribunal has affirmed our belief as government that a revitalized and a well-capitalized SAA presents the country with significant opportunities to boost economic connectivity and strategic reach that should benefit the South African economy and its people for years to come.
For Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405, I am Dondani Takarani.
All right, let's make sense of these developments for you now. Bring in aviation expert Guy Leitch, who joins us via our video link this morning. Guy, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks as always for making time. I wonder if we could just begin with placing this development for people who haven't been following this closely as perhaps you have. This is described as a step in the right direction, a historic day for the transaction. But does it put to bed, for instance, questions that people had about even just how much SAA has been sold for here to Takatso Consortium?
Yeah, hi. Nice to be with you guys. There are 101 questions still outstanding, but I think that, yes, we can take a lot of hope from this development that things are indeed moving forward. As I said, this deal has turned out to be something of an elephant. And as we know the old saying, you've got to eat an elephant bite by bite. And the bites seem to be getting progressively done. So we are slowly moving towards it. I need to just point out that this step was supposed to be reached in March. That was the deadline given by Minister Gordon. We're now, another 4 months later, so we're still running badly behind schedule. But at least we're still moving ahead in the right direction. For your listeners' benefits, the key point here was that after the business rescue process, the Department of Public Enterprises decided that, quite correctly in my opinion, the government has no ability or role in running an airline, which is after all a tremendously capital-intensive and margin-thin and skills-intensive business. So they agreed to privatize it or sell off 51%. And much to everyone's surprise, including mine, they produced a buyer in the form of the Takatso Consortium. And we were all really pleased to hear that because it was a nice blend of skills. It brought in Harris, the backing partners, enormous financial resources. It brought in the aviation resources of Global Airways, which are, in a sense, the minority partners we're talking about here. Yeah. And, of course, combined them with SAA's great brand and route network and so on. So it was all a really great deal, but this was over 2 years ago. And since then, the public have grown, dare I say, disenchanted or disillusioned, and indeed more skeptical about whether the deal was really going to happen and whether Minister Gordon was determined to make it happen. It seems to be that, as I said, it's moving forward one step at a time, and the hurdles have been slowly overcome. I just need to quickly point out, though, that there are, in my opinion, significant hurdles still to be overcome.
Right.
So we mustn't convince ourselves that this deal is going to end, or the end is just around the corner. in the normal course of events, to finalize this deal would take at least another year to 18 months because there's an act of Parliament. The SAA Act will have to be changed. It only envisages a single shareholder, and that's the state. The Air Services Licensing Council would have to amend or issue new licenses, and the Civil Aviation Authority will have to issue a new or amended AOC, which is an Aircraft Operator Certificate. All of these things take over a year. But nonetheless, I'm hopeful that this deal is really beginning to move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that the consortium, as far as you're concerned, had the requisite skills, because part of the conditions here is that those minority shareholders in the consortium need to sell their shares because the Competition Tribunal concurred with the concerns raised by the Competition Commission that some of those players, including Global Aviation, who actually operates Lyft, may have access to competitive information in the sector itself. I suppose in principle it makes sense, but I mean, does that then raise your concerns about whether or not Takatso Aviation then is left with the requisite skills to get this right?
That's the key question. You know, is the SAA in the past 2 years getting itself back on its feet? Is it attracting the requisite skills? The indications are that thankfully, yes, that is the case. We are told by DPE that SAA is running at a profit. I'm a little skeptical as to exactly what that means. I doubt whether the entire group is running at a profit, but certainly SAA, the airline, should be running at a profit. So presumably they have managed to attract, retrain, and keep the skills. And to SAA's credit, they have been very measured in the way they've returned to operations. They've started domestically and regionally. They still only just recently, this last month, launched the first long-haul international service to Sao Paulo. So they are being very responsible about that. They're not treating it all as a massive vanity project, as a flag-waving exercise. There are good signs that that SAA management are doing it right, and perhaps they can get by without the Takatso skills, or they can hire them in as the normal way is with consultants.
Yeah. You know, as you mentioned, some time has passed since discussions even started around this particular transaction. And despite that, government is still convinced that, in fact, SAA carries enormous economic potential for this country and has a role to play in the industry itself. To what extent do you agree with that still?
That is an excellent question because it goes very much to my pet subject. And the answer is that, yes, the importance of air connectivity cannot be underestimated. It's what brings investment to this country. It's what brings the massive income that we get from tourism. It brings businessmen who decide whether or not to build a factory or a plant and so on. So the spin-offs come at any number of levels on top of just the actual localization of industry, which means that all the stuff is kept internal. If SAA didn't exist, then we would be finding that all the ticket money, for argument's sake, and all the other skills would be exported to, for instance, the Middle East 3 airlines, Emirates, Qatar, and so on, or perhaps Lufthansa or British Airways. That wouldn't be good for the country's balance of payments. It wouldn't be good for retention of skills. So there is a good argument to be made for localizing or having these skills, but the point is at what cost? And where it is justified that the state have an investment in the airline, any subsidies need to be very clearly ring-fenced so that they're not just allowed to grow wantonly or out of control, as happened over the past 20 years, in fact. Insightful as always. Guy Leitch, thanks very much indeed for your time. Appreciate it. Guy Leitch, of course, an aviation expert.